I didn't think she was going to be there this year because of the bad press. Now, everything that Sophie Cunningham did this year put the Indiana Fever and the entire league on notice. I'm sticking by it. I think they're going to try to Colin Kaepernick her, bro. I really do. It goes on to say the 30-year-old guard who joined the Fever in 2025 after 6 years with the Phoenix Mercury signed a one-year deal for 2026 that ends soon, fueling speculation about her exit. Her summer ESPN comments wanting to protect young girls from competing against biological men, which she called common sense, drew cheers from spectators and boos at games. Backers highlights her three-point shooting, enforcer style, and broad apparel, arguing the WNBA needs her more than she needs it amid rumors tied to her views. Yes, Sophie Cunningham, whether they like this or not,
Professional basketball is going through one of the most contentious stretches in its history, and at the center of it is a reserve guard from Missouri who never set out to become the face of a cultural argument.
I'm talking to all the analysts and the pundits and the reporters and everybody else in between out there. You don't get to dictate for the paying audience what they like and what they dislike. I could make the argument that the fact that this stuff has been politicized, because it clearly has been, and people are forced to take sides, is something that's working to the benefit of the WNBA, because we're talking about the WNBA more than we ever have.
That's a good point. We are talking about the league more than we ever have. Is this a case of all publicity is good publicity? Also, to Stephen A's earlier point,
Sophie Cunningham plays for the Indiana Fever, a team that has spent the past 2 seasons at the center of the league's rise in popularity, largely because of her teammate Caitlin Clark. But over the summer, Cunningham herself became the story.
This t-shirts during overtime and told us we had to leave.
And this says for the girl.
Or cover our shirts. This just happened.
It's crazy, right? It's totally crazy. That's the mother and daughter team that just the other day were kicked out of the game in Atlanta. It turns out they paid like $1,000 for their tickets, which everybody was like, oh my God, $1,000 for a WNBA ticket? Like, that in and of itself is shocking. And then they get kicked out because they're wearing XX and XY. Just like Cantor was kicked out of the game last night because he was wearing a woman and what she is, the definition of a woman. And it's so funny to me. It's so weird that this is becoming such a big thing. Like, honestly, you really have to make that big a deal of it? Apparently they do. There is a school of thought there that is like uber progressive and uber crazy in the athletic world and embodied by so many of these people that are in the WNBA. And they don't like what Sophie represents for a whole lot of reasons, right? Same thing with Caitlin Clark. You know the drill on that. And then you get, the Megan Rapinoe's of the world even, that it feels so inclined to weigh in on this too. Like, Megan, really? Didn't you play like a bunch of 15-year-old boys and they whipped your you-know-what pretty darn fast? Like, you can't play against men.
And the reasons had nothing to do with her play on the court. The origin point was a profile published by ESPN in July, built around comments Cunningham made about transgender athletes competing in women's sports. She said she wanted to protect young girls in locker rooms and in competition from having to face what she called biological men.
Can wake up and say, I'm a female and I want to participate in the NBA. According to the letter of the language of the law, you can actually get away with it. And that needs to be clarified. Clearly, that's a political position to take. And I think on one hand, Enos Cantor was very wrong. It was a classless thing for him to do.
well, I don't even think it's a political issue. That's the craziest part. It's not a political issue. It's a common sense issue. The WNBA, they maybe have turned it into a political issue because they refuse to use basic logic and anatomy. But it's not really a political issue. Or it shouldn't at least be a political issue. Maybe that's a better way to put it. It shouldn't be a political issue because it's common sense, but it's a political issue because those who are delusional have been catered to for far too long. To now they're believing their own delusions, and common sense needs to step in every now and then and just smack you over the head.
Because it's not, the ladies that are playing don't have anything to do with this. The league does. Its collective bargaining agreement may be the case. The liberal tilt that it has might be a cause or a cause effect to some degree. I get all of that, but the actual ladies that are involved, they have nothing to do with this, and they don't deserve to be agitated. the way he clearly was willing to do in attendance at the game. It wasn't just about him standing, but he was just about to step to her. You got no business doing that.
He was just about to step to her. You don't believe that, Stephen A., do you? You don't believe that, Stephen A. She ran across the entire court. She went from one side of the court to the other side of the court to get into his face. You don't believe he was going to step on the court, do you?
And she pushed back on the idea that her position amounted to hatred toward transgender people. She described herself as trying to combine honesty with compassion, not hostility. Whether or not people accepted that framing, the comments landed at a moment when the debate over transgender participation in athletics was already a fixture of national politics, and a WNBA player's voice on the subject guaranteed attention the league had not planned for. The reaction was immediate, and it did not stay confined to social media. Within days, fans began showing up to Fever games wearing shirts referencing the debate, some reading messages of support for transgender athletes, others displaying the letters X and XY as a reference to chromosomal sex. Opposing arenas became flashpoints. During one Fever game, the situation escalated into a courtside altercation involving fans, and reporters afterward asked Clark directly whether the controversy was disrupting the team. Her answer was measured. She said it was up to leagues and governing bodies to work with athletes to find solutions, and that the team's own focus needed to stay on winning basketball games, which, by her own admission, they had not done well enough that night. Not everyone in the Fever organization was aligned with Cunningham's decision to keep talking about the subject publicly. Her head coach, Stephanie White, made clear in the days that followed that she did not share Cunningham's view that the ongoing commentary was not a distraction to the team. Cunningham, for her part, said plainly that she intended to keep speaking and had no plans to walk anything back. When pressed again weeks later, her position had not moved. She told reporters she had said what she said, and that she agreed with parts of both sides of the broader debate without changing her core stance. Other teams around the league responded in their own way. When the Fever played the New York Liberty, the Liberty used their in-arena video screens during the game to post messages welcoming transgender fans, a pointed rebuttal aimed squarely at Cunningham that drew wide coverage in its own right. It was one of several instances of a WNBA franchise using its own platform to publicly distance itself from a player on a different roster, which is not something that happens often in professional sports, and underscored how unusual this moment had become for the league. The controversy also intersected with an incident involving a minority owner of the Seattle Storm, Celeste Keaton, who was suspended by the league after reportedly directing an insult at two teenage fans of Cunningham's during a game in Seattle. That incident became its own subplot in the broader story, cited by media covering the fallout as evidence of how personal and heated the atmosphere around Cunningham had become, extending beyond players and into ownership. None of this occurred in a vacuum. The WNBA was already navigating a tense and consequential year of labor negotiations, with players pushing for a larger share of a league that has grown rapidly in value, viewership, and media rights revenue. The new collective bargaining agreement ratified for the 2026 season includes a provision stating explicitly that only players who are women are eligible to compete in the league, formalizing existing eligibility rules amid the broader public debate. Cunningham's comments had reignited. That same negotiating period produced a separate and, in some ways, more consequential storyline involving league leadership. Minnesota Lynx forward Nafisa Collier used her end-of-season exit interview to deliver an unusually direct rebuke of Commissioner Cathy Engelbert, criticizing the league office over officiating standards and player pay. Collier said the league currently had, in her words, the worst leadership in the world, and she recounted a private conversation in which she said Engelbert suggested Clark should be grateful for the platform the WNBA had given her, rather than focused on how little players in their first 4 years were being paid relative to the revenue they were generating. Engelbert has denied making those specific remarks. Collier's comments drew public support from a number of players and coaches, including Clark, who said Collier had made a lot of valid points. The criticism was significant enough that Sports Business Journal reported, citing sources close to the situation, that Engelbert was likely to leave her position once the new collective bargaining agreement was finalized, describing the expected departure as driven by relationship strain with players and colleagues built up over years of rapid league growth. The WNBA itself called that report categorically false. Engelbert addressed the speculation directly at a press conference ahead of the 2025 WNBA Finals. She told reporters she had never been a quitter, that she was entering her 40th year in business, and that she did not intend to shy away from a difficult moment. She dismissed the resignation reports as clickbait and said she considered herself the leader of the league, not someone looking to step aside. She also used the appearance to push back on the account of her private conversation with Collier, praising Clark's impact on the sport and crediting her with bringing tens of millions of new fans into the game. Even so, the pressure on Engelbert has not disappeared. Media analysts covering the league, including ESPN's Elle Duncan, have said publicly that they expect a leadership change to eventually happen, arguing that the relationship between the commissioner's office and a significant part of the player base may be too damaged to fully repair. Engelbert, for her own part, has continued to point to tangible results from her tenure, including the addition of 6 expansion franchises by 2030 and a new media rights agreement worth more than $2 billion over its life, along with a fully league-funded charter flight program introduced this past season to address player concerns about travel and safety. The Cunningham story and the Engelbert story are not the same controversy, but they have unfolded on the same timeline inside the same institution during the same fight over what the WNBA is becoming as it grows into a far bigger business than it was even 3 years ago. One is a dispute over what players should be allowed to say publicly, and how the league and its fan base respond when a player's personal views collide with the league's broader audience. The other is a dispute over whether the league's own leadership has kept pace with the demands of players who believe their value has outgrown their compensation and their say in how the business is run. What connects them is a league that is, by almost every external measure, thriving. Viewership has climbed sharply over the past 2 seasons. Franchise values have risen enough to support the addition of new expansion teams. The media rights deal secured under Engelbert's leadership is worth billions of dollars over its term. And yet, internally, the organization is dealing with open disagreement between players and the league office over pay, over governance, and over how much room individual athletes have to speak on divisive political and social issues without the league or their own franchises publicly pushing back. Cunningham, despite the controversy, has not backed away from the platform it created for her. Her public profile has grown substantially over the past year, driven both by the trans athletes controversy and by an earlier moment in which she physically defended Clark during an on-court altercation, an incident that itself drew significant new attention to her online following. She has continued to give interviews and make public appearances discussing her views on subjects beyond basketball, including a December appearance on an online sports and comedy show where she weighed in passing, on the question of equal pay between men and women. She has described herself repeatedly as someone willing to accept the criticism that comes with speaking her mind rather than staying silent to avoid controversy. Engelbert, meanwhile, is entering the 2026 season with her position more precarious than it has been at any point since she took over as the league's first commissioner in 2019. She has publicly committed to staying through the current cycle and has framed her record, including the league's expansion and its new national television agreements, as evidence she should be trusted to lead the WNBA through its next stage of growth. Whether the players who have publicly criticized her leadership accept that framing remains an open question heading into the new season, none of what has happened around Cunningham amounts to a conspiracy or an orchestrated effort by team owners to remove her from the league, and there is no public reporting to support the idea that she faces contract termination or a coordinated blackballing campaign. What has happened is more straightforward, if still unusual by the standards of professional sports. A player spoke publicly on one of the most polarizing political issues in the country. A significant share of the league's fan base and some of its franchises pushed back forcefully and publicly, and the controversy arrived at the same time the league's own leadership was already under real pressure from its players over pay, officiating, and governance. Those 2 pressures, one about a player's speech and one about the commissioner's standing, have combined to make the 2025 off-season one of the most turbulent in WNBA history, heading into a 2026 season in which both issues are likely to remain unresolved.